Welcome everyone, and thanks for tuning in for another episode of Level Up Law. We're here at South Carolina Legal Services. We're leveling up your legal knowledge on the different areas of law that we practice in. I'm Susan Engel, Senior Staff Attorney with South Carolina Legal Services, and I'll be the host of the webinar today, along with our producer, Kenneth Elliott, from our IT department here at Legal Services. We are joined today by SCLS attorney Bronte Anelli from our office in Conway, South Carolina. Bronte will be discussing how to deal with those dreaded robocalls and telemarketers. So this should prove to be a very interesting episode of Level Up Law. Now remember, this is not any legal advice, but just general information for the public. Always consult with an attorney for any of those specific legal issues that you have personally. At the end of today's presentation, we will be providing some information about how to apply for our free legal assistance here at Legal Services, and also how to access our public information and other resources that we have for you. As always, we will post a recording of this webcast on our YouTube channel later this week, and that will also have the slides that Bronte will be using today. Now, even though you'll be in listen-only mode, be sure to take advantage of the opportunity and put any questions you have in the question box. As time allows, Bronte will provide some general information to answer your questions. Again, thanks everyone so much for joining us today, and Bronte, you can go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you, Susie, for that wonderful introduction. As Susie has stated, my name is Bronte Anelli, and I am an attorney here with South Carolina Legal Services, and I'm really excited today to be teaching you about robocalling. Exactly what are your rights? This is something that more people seem to be experiencing on a daily basis. Also, I have experienced my entire life and did not know that I could actually do things to stop it. So my purpose of today's presentation is to actually give you tools that you can use yourself, not only just informing you about the law. So before we begin, I do have a poll for you. Yes, I do have a poll for you. So, how many calls do you get from telemarketers per week? I will tell you myself, I get about 10 plus, and I know when I first got my number, I had way too many that I actually thought about changing my number at one point in time.
Okay, if everybody can go ahead and select one of the options, and we will close the poll in about 15 seconds. Okay, it looks like most people, 67%, are in that 3 to 10 category, and the other 33% get 1 to 3 calls per week.
Perfect. Well, one thing we will teach you today is how to make those numbers go down significantly. So before we begin, we need to answer ourselves, what is robocalling? A robocall is a phone call using a computerized auto dial system to deliver a pre-recorded message. It's typically for political and telephone marketing campaigns. I know during the election, I got a ton of political phone calls, and that is an example of telemarketing. Another example is a number from Utah calling you in Boston. Today's course is only focusing on what you can do to protect yourself from these annoying calls that you receive that are computerized, automated, pre-recording messages. So although you may receive a lot of other phone calls from other organizations, from actual persons, this one is really for those pre-recorded messages that you get from all over the country. So first, I'm going to teach you what are your rights. Well, you are actually protected under an act from the federal government. There's a federal act in place that actually helps protect you. The law was enacted by Congress, and anybody doing business in the US should be following this law, or anybody calling a person in the US, even if they're out of the United States, should be following this law. This is called the Telephone Communication Protections Act, or the TCPA. I'm going to be using the TCPA all throughout this call just because it really helps shorten it. Also, that way you become familiar with the acronyms. It protects you against a variety of different things pertaining to your phone call. And as I stated before, we are focusing only on the pre-recorded messages. It limits unsolicited pre-recorded telemarketing calls made by your landline home phone. And it also prohibits all auto-dialed or pre-recorded calls or text messages to your cell phone, guests, or patients at rooms in healthcare facilities or elderly homes, or any telephone line where you are charged for your call. Because it limits that to where you are charged for your call, it includes all cell phones. So what this means is that on your home phone, there are certain things that can and cannot be done. But again, your cell phone limits everything. But of course, as always, there are exceptions. So the TCPA prohibits initiating any marketing calls to a residential telephone line using an artificial or pre-recorded voice to deliver a message without the prior express consent of you, the called party, except in a case where it is an emergency, a debt collection call owed, or a debt owed by the federal government. Telemarketing calls to home lines can be made using an automated telephone dialing system, or the ATDS. We'll be talking a little bit about that later, and that can be done without your prior consent. But it seems then that there are limitations that will be placed on telemarketing. Well, the question then is, what is that? Well, Wikipedia says that telemarketing is trying to get people to buy products or services through the phone. However, the federal government has expanded that a little bit, and under the federal definition, it includes that messages sent for the purposes of encouraging the purchase or rental of or investment in properties, goods, or services. As you can see between the two definitions, the federal definition really does expand it a little bit more compared to Wikipedia. So it is always important that when you are trying to figure out what you can and cannot do at home, you look at the law, not Wikipedia. But automated messages that are not telemarketing are calls made for emergencies like flood warnings containing information like balances from your bank, fraud, for your credit cards, school closings, or calls made to and on behalf of nonprofits, and any healthcare messages on behalf of the message facility. So I know one thing that is very popular that a lot of people are doing is when they go see a doctor, they check off the box that the doctor can leave a voicemail talking about what is wrong with them, as well as their results from the labs. And that in itself is not telemarketing, as well as emergency calls about flood warnings, school closures, or your bank contacting you for those fraud. Those are all examples of what telemarketing is not. It is specifically for the encouraging of purchasing, renting, investment of any property, goods, or services that you may have. Now remember that under the TCPA, you are protected for pre-recorded calls to your home and auto-dialed or pre-recorded messages to your cell phone for these purposes. But what happens when the company calling you with the pre-recorded messages are using the automated telephone dialing system, or the ATDS? Well, as I've already talked about a little bit before, ATDS stands for the Automated Telephone Dialing System. These are systems that we think about where a computer will randomly just start calling you, and this computer has a phone number located in Utah, but you're here in Boston, or here in South Carolina, I should say, and every single week they just call you. And then all of a sudden you start getting another number about a week or two later, just constantly calling you. These are the automated telephone dialing systems. It If you pick it up, it typically plays a pre-recorded message. Often we ignore it. And once you click ignore or you hang up the phone, it just automatically calls another one. The best way to think of it is it's a computer system that just sits there and dials everything for you. Believe it or not, you are actually protected under these automatic telephone dialing systems, so these computers and the people that run these computers. Under the TCPA, it is illegal for anyone in the US or someone outside of the US calling you to make a call using this system or an artificial or pre-recorded message to any number assigned to a cellular service or any number where you are charged for the call. But that does not protect your home phone. You may be saying to yourself, well, doesn't that mean that all calls that use this system to my cell phone is illegal? Well, no, unfortunately not. Just like everything, the government has made exceptions to the rules. And there are two particular exceptions: emergencies and calls where they have received your prior express consent. Emergencies are ones that I've already mentioned, so flood warnings, snowstorms, tornado warnings, school closings. They are all permitted to call you with this automatic dialing system, and it's just for convenience purposes. That way you don't have one person trying to reach 100 people dialing on their own. This is a system that will allow them and allow the emergency information to get out very quickly, which is exactly what we need. But they can also use this system if you gave them prior written consent, or prior express consent, I should say. Well, you might be thinking to yourself, I have never signed up to be given all of my phone numbers to all of these people in order to have my phone be called as many times as it is. So at this time, I do have another poll question for you. I'm going to ask you, how many applications have you filled out for services? And services includes signing up for credit cards, subscriptions, applying to things like loans, holidays, any type of service that you may have received. I will tell you, I think at this point, I think I might have done it over 20 times. Just between school and my subscriptions, about 20 plus applications sounds about right for me.
All right, it looks like most people have done over 20.
See, you guys and I, we're all in the same boat here together. Well, it is interesting because your application actually has that prior written consent. So first and foremost, the law itself is not defined for prior written consent. It is an order and has been expanded through case law. So under the order, the TCPA helps us define it as any telephone subscriber who releases their number has in effect given prior written consent to be called by the company to which they release their number. A court case has expanded it even further and says that not only have you given the company that you gave your number to, but also any agency calling on their behalf. So what this means is that every time you fill out an application or subscribe to anything, you have not only given that company or person permission to call you, but you have given anybody calling on their behalf permission to call you. So to put this in an example, you won the lottery, and the first thing you do is decide to sign up for a cruise. So you book the cruise, everything's going, and on some cruises, when they go to a different island or a different port, they have these adventures that you could sign up with third-party companies located in the area. If you go to the Caribbean, it's typically snorkeling, biking, fishing, kayaking, zip lining, things like that. So when you sign up for this holiday, you have given, of course, the cruise ship the authority to contact you relating to the cruise. But you also have given permission for all of those agencies to contact you to see if you're willing to sign up for their products and their services while you're on your cruise. So even though you did not give those smaller companies permission to call you, because you gave that bigger company permission to call you, and these smaller companies are contacting you because you're part of the big company, and in this example, it's the cruise ship, you have actually given your number out instead of to one person to 10, 15 people, and they can all contact you. So this is how you can have one application lead to hundreds of phone calls in a month and possibly a year. But the good news is that you can actually revoke your consent. There are a couple of ways you can do that. So revoking consent is what you can do on your own. And the TCPA allows you to revoke it using any reasonable methods. And what reasonable methods that the Act is telling you to do, just tell them. Answer the call. Say, stop calling me. Hang up the phone. If any way that you can clearly tell that organization that you do not want to be called anymore, that is a reasonable method under the law. You can also choose to write a letter and send it to the company themselves. Once you have revoked your consent, then they are not supposed to contact you anymore. So any which way you can clearly do it, you're able to do it for. However, you cannot revoke consent in agreements that you entered into with a company that they told you about. And let me explain that a little bit clearly. I don't think I did a good enough job. So any person who agreed to be contacted as part of a bargain for exchange, really fancy way of saying part of a contract, cannot unilaterally revoke if it's part of that contract. So you might be thinking, well, I don't call up my cruise ship company and negotiate what type of bedding I want, where I want, how the price or any of that. I don't do that. So what do you mean by contract? Well, the terms and conditions box that you click every single time you sign up for something online is part of that contract. So you cannot revoke your consent if it says in those terms and conditions that you cannot revoke your consent without their permission. All right. So for example, I do have a poll here, and this is just to help you with hypotheticals. So Sam signs up for an account for Amazon. Sam gives his telephone number in the application and hits submit. Then Send It To Us, a delivery service from Amazon, keeps contacting Sam trying to get him to sign up for quick shipping. Can Sam revoke his consent from Send It To Us? And just so you know, Send It To Us is not an actual delivery service. I made it up, but I thought it was very clever, so it makes me happy, and I think it should be a delivery service.
Very clever, for sure. Okay, it looks like we have got a 50-50 split on that. So
Okay.
yes
So
for 50% and no for 50%. So what's the right answer, Ronti?
the right answer is yes. Of course, as always, with this hypothetical as it is written, the answer is yes, he can revoke. He cannot revoke if in the terms and conditions it says he cannot. But when it comes to the hypothetical as it is written, he can revoke. All he has to do is tell Send It To Us to stop calling him. All right, I do have another hypothetical here. John signs up for a federally backed mortgage. As he fills out the application, he gives them his number and clicks the terms and conditions box saying he agrees. John does not read the terms and conditions, just like any other person. But in the terms, it allows John to be contacted by his phone number and as part of the contract, he cannot revoke it on his own. John is now receiving calls from private mortgage companies on behalf of the federally backed mortgage company. Can John revoke this consent on his own?
Okay. And the answer is 100% of our audience said no, he cannot revoke this on his own.
Exactly. So in this situation, you guys are absolutely correct. He cannot revoke it on his own, which is why it is important to read the term and conditions. But I found out in law school that if you spent your entire life reading every term and conditions, you spent an average of 18 years of your life reading contracts. So the purpose of today's meeting is, how do you stop this? There are 3 ways that you can actually stop this from happening and to really limit those amount of calls. You can do it on your own, you can contact agencies, and you could actually go through court action. So my main focus is really going to be on what you can do on your own to stop this. All right, so if you have pen and papers, this is a good time to bring them out. So the first thing you can do is actually answer your phone. I know it sounds weird. I know it goes against everything that people taught us. I know my mom told me never answer a number you do not know, but answering the phone is your first step to stopping this. So by answering the phone, you can do a couple of things. First, you can collect the information, and you can also revoke consent. When you collect their information, you need to find out who is calling you, what their number is, where their location is. Sometimes automated messages will have options for you. If they're asking you to verify information, do not, I repeat, do not give them any of your information. Do not verify anything. Do not admit that you are so-and-so with that social security number living at that address, because if it is a scam, they now have your correct contact information, but also you have not collected their information. The purpose of collecting their information is that you can do some research to figure out if this is a scam or if this is a proper agency. And that really is to protect you. So knowing if people have your information out there is step 1 to knowing if you are fully protected on your own. Now, again, as I stated, for verification, it'll just ask you to press 1 or 2. Do not do it. If it is a person on the line, again, do not answer any of their questions. If they say they cannot give you any of their information of who they are, where they are, their address, their website, until you verify your information, that's a lie. They should be giving you all of their contact information if you ask for it, and you are not required to verify any of your information online. Collecting information is important because, as I stated, you will know if a call is a scam or if it's not. And it's also a way for you to revoke consent by simply answering the phone. So once you collect this information, immediately tell them, do not call me, and hang up the phone. The second thing you can do, besides revoking consent through the phone number, is also using that information that you have collected to send them a letter. So if it is an automated voice message and they didn't have that option for you to say, stop calling me, you can type up a letter saying, stop calling me, send it to the information that you received, and then that should prevent the calls from going forward. The next thing you can do is keep track of your numbers. This is very important because every single time they contact you, they being the company or person, that they contact you after you have revoked consent is a violation of the law. It is also important to keep track of numbers because if it is an automated telephone dialing system, that is illegal in a lot of cases. And I know a couple of agencies, like the Consumer Affairs Bureau, are actually actively working to stop these numbers from being used again. So things that you can do is just simply write them down, kind of keep a list of them. And again, you can report them both to the FCC as well as the commission itself. And then you can complain to agencies. So a couple of things that you can do at agencies here. The first thing you can do is actually put your name on the National Do Not Call Registry. This is a list that all companies have access to nationwide. And if your name's on that list and they still continue to call you without your express consent, well, then what they're doing is illegal. And that's a way to just blanket all of your revocations of your express consent. The next thing you can do is actually contact the Consumer Affairs Commission. You can present them with all of the numbers that you receive so they can keep track of that. They do have a task force, as I stated before, to set up to help get robocalls. And to do this, they actually do need the numbers. So if you do have that information, send it over to them. They are actively working to prevent it. Then finally, you can actually complain to the state attorney general. Many states actually have huge class action lawsuits going against the various companies who are participating in robocalling and violating the TCPA. And that information is actually at the state attorney general's office. So by complaining to the state attorney general, you are making sure that they are aware that this issue is occurring in the state. And if they have enough people complaining about it, well, then they might be able to do something legally on your behalf for that, which is a great transition into the third thing that you can occur in. Pardon me. The third thing that can assist you in preventing these robocalls, and that is through court assistance. So if you can afford to, you can also try to get a private attorney to stop you or to help you stop these calls by filing a private action. A private court case is a court case not brought by a government employee, so this would not be brought by the state, but by a private attorney. To prove this case, you must prove the following: that there was a violation of the act, that a company willfully or knowingly violated it, and if they have satisfied the first two, well, then the court may award up to 3 times the amount available. And this is actually for the cost that you experienced, be it every single time they called you and you lost $1.50 or 50 cents, whatever it may be, or up to $500 for each violation. And it's typically whichever one is larger at that point. Now, things you should be aware of, that in preparing for a court case, it's very important, especially for a private action, that you keep track of when you revoked, what company you revoked to, how you revoked, if you wrote them a letter, a copy of that letter, all the numbers that called you after you revoked for that company, because every single time that every single time that they have contacted you after you expressly revoked your consent is a violation, is a willful and knowing violation, and for every single call, it's $500 because every call is a violation itself. Now, willful and knowing, that doesn't mean a mistake. So for example, somebody else accidentally put your number on their application or the company accidentally put your number in when they were setting up the auto dial. That mistakes themselves are not willful or knowing, so they do not count. But if a company is knowingly doing so, you revoke your consent and still is calling you, then that is where court assistance can come in. So really, when it comes down to what type of assistance can be helpful, it's really what you can do on your own. It really starts with you, which is very different for what a lot of different areas of law are about. There are many things you can do on your own up front to stop these calls. Now, there are things that you need to watch out for and make sure that you do not do. So the first one is unknown or blocked numbers. Just do not answer them. If the call screen says unknown, or if the number is blocked, just do not answer them, ignore them. We're talking about those numbers where it pops up and it looks like a number that could belong to your sister or your brother. Those are the numbers we're talking about. We're not talking about numbers that come up blocked on your phone. Make sure they remain blocked because those numbers are more likely to be spam and actually trying to create fraud, and we don't want you to experience that. Also, right now, many people are receiving calls from debt collectors. First, it's always good to assume that debt collectors have your consent. This presentation was not for debt collectors. The reason being is that there are a lot of different other laws and exceptions that do apply for debt collectors. But you can still attempt to revoke your consent because some debt collectors do not have that level of consent. And to do so, you would just answer the phone call like you would. They would identify themselves that they're trying to collect a debt. Once again, do not verify any of your information. Just ask them not to call you and to only be contacted through written communications. They should have your contact information if they're a legitimate company. So just ask that it be sent to the address that they have on file. And if they are legitimate, they will send you communications only through written communications at that point. If they're not legitimate, they're going to keep trying to call you. So I do recommend that you keep track of their numbers as well. And you do contact an attorney to assist you even further after you have revoked again. So with that being stated, I do have a couple of other questions. So this poll is just the beginning of many different hypotheticals. So first, you receive a call from a number you do not recognize. Do you ignore it or answer it?
That's a good question, definitely.
And I will add that this is not an unknown number or a blocked number. This is just a number that's random calling you.
Okay, it looks like everyone has voted, and we have 75% say answer it and 25% say ignore the call.
Great. I love the enthusiasm. So I would personally say answer it. That is the first way that you begin stopping all of these random numbers calling you. I would recommend only ignoring it if it is a blocked or unknown number. But in this hypothetical, since it is just a number you do not recognize and I did not specify even further, I would recommend you answer it. So you answer the call and you hear that it's an automated message identifying the company and asking for a verification. Do you, A, verify the information, B, write their name and their number down and then hang up the phone, or it depends?
All right, I think we can close the poll now. And we've got another 50-50 split, Bronte.
So
say write down the name and number and then hang up, and 50% say it depends.
Well, in this situation, it does depend. And the reason why I say it does depend is because if a bank is calling you and it's your bank saying, hey, there's some fraudulent activity on your credit card, we just want to make sure that this information is correct. And you will know it. So for example, a personal example, the other day I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it just because I was busy at the time. And they left a voicemail saying, hey, this is your bank, give us a call back, we're trying to verify some information. So I gave them a call and they said, oh, thank you for giving us a call back. We're just making sure this information is correct. And they verified my 5 most recent transactions. The reason being is because I ended up buying something that I normally wouldn't buy. For something like that, it is very good to verify your information. The bank will identify itself. It'll make sure that they're telling you the information, not so much of, hey, tell me your social security number, tell me all that information. It's more of you just saying yes or no to the information that they have on file. So in that situation, it's good to verify. Now, if you answer the phone and it's nobody you recognize, it's not your bank asking for verification or for your health services, write the name and number down and then hang up the phone. So that was a trick question. So do not worry if you feel bad or anything. Y'all are doing great. So the next hypothetical. So in this situation, you write the name and number down of the company, you hang up the phone. You research the company and find their address. The company continues to call you. What should you do? A, write a letter revoking the consent. B, answer and tell them to stop calling you. C, keep track of all the numbers they call you from and the amount of times they call you. And D, all of the above. So again, in this hypothetical, you do not know who the company is. You wrote their name and number down and then hung up the phone.
Well, it looks like everybody's learning a lot today. The 100% of the people said all of the above.
Y'all are right here. So exactly, you will do everything. The more that you can do to be clear, the better. Now I am going to take this time to mention something that I did forget previously. If you pick up the phone and are very clear to say, stop calling me, but then the company says, well, to revoke consent, you have to go through steps A through D. No, you do not. All you have to do is tell them to stop calling. I typically recommend also writing a letter. That way it's very clear that you have revoked consent and there's no doubts about it that you did. So that's always my preference, is to cover yourself by doing it 2 ways instead of just one. And then again, keeping track of that numbers to really help yourself, any agency that you contacted, or if you choose to go to the Attorney General or to a private attorney, that will definitely help them out. Finally, my last polling question. What is the first thing you should do after this call? Are you going to eat lunch, sign up for the National Do Not Call Registry, or A and B, because you're both hungry and you also want to protect yourself?
All right, we got 50-50. There's only 50% of the people out there that are hungry. 50% said sign up for the National Do Not Call Registry, and 50% said both A and B, I am hungry and I want to protect myself.
That's awesome. So I am also hungry and I want to protect myself, so I'm going to be doing both, but whatever your preference is, that's, there was no way to get that question wrong. All right, so at this point in time, I am going to answer any questions that you may have. The information on the screen is our contact information here for South Carolina Legal Services. As I stated before, or pardon me, as Susie stated before, you should contact an attorney for specific assistance. This was just to tell you what you can do on your own to stop those pesky robocalls. So with that being stated, if there are any questions, I do not mind answering, or if Susie has any answers herself, I will be here.
Well, thanks so much, Bronte. I do want to bring in our producer, Kenneth, because the slide that I'm seeing right now is one of the poll questions still, so we may not have officially closed one of our polls. So Producer Kenneth, if you can figure that out for me, that'd be great. So we can show everyone our contact information, because if you're not able to afford a lawyer and you need one for this or any other type of topic that we handle here at South Carolina Legal Services, then we do want you to have that information. Okay, now, Bronte, I'm just seeing you on the screen, and there's the slide. Great. So everybody can get that information. You know, we have a lot of resources at South Carolina Legal Services, and we've gotten a lot of compliments on how many resources we do have, both on our websites, sclegal.org and lawhelp.org/sc, as well as all of our social media and all of these great Level Up Law episodes that we have on our YouTube channel. It looks like right now we don't have any questions. That was a very thorough presentation. And since you invited me to say something, Bronte, I do want to say I thought you made a great point about reading the terms and conditions. You know, sadly, I think most people don't take the time to read the terms and conditions when they click that box. And that can definitely be unfortunate, because, you know, quite often people say, well, gee, I had no idea that this would happen. And, you know, you have to say, well, had you read the terms and conditions that you clicked, that you agreed to, you probably would have seen that. So sometimes that's a helpful reason or excuse, but most times it's not. So if you can read the terms and conditions, that's always a great thing. But I think human nature, unfortunately, is to not read them. And I thought you made a great point about the consent to these calls is going to be buried in those terms and conditions. So most likely you did agree to it. Well, I want to take this moment while we're showing our information on the screen to thank you, Bronte and Ellie, for an excellent presentation on robocalls. This is one of those things that we all need to know more about, because it is such a prevalent thing in our society right now. And thanks to all of you in the audience who joined us today. We really do appreciate your interest in this subject matter and the others that we bring to you here each week on Level Up Law. Every Tuesday at noon, we educate the public on some of these most common legal issues that we see here at South Carolina Legal Services. So please be sure and let folks know about our Level Up Law series. You can just go to our YouTube channel at SC Legal Services and find all the past episodes. And if you find it helpful, and if you found today's episode helpful, definitely give it a thumbs up there, and share the broadcast as well with others that you think it might be helpful for. And while you're on our YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the red subscribe button, so that you're gonna be hopefully able to see everything that we put on that YouTube channel, and sign up for the alerts by ringing that little bell, and you'll get a notification every time we post a new episode of Level Up Law or any other material that we post on our channel for the public. Okay, if you have an issue and you need legal assistance and you cannot afford a lawyer, you may be eligible for our free legal representation. And you can see here again on the screen our contact information. So please be sure and check that out. If you can't call during the intake hours that are Monday through Thursday from 9 to 6, you can apply online. And we have a Level Up Law episode that gives you some really great helpful hints about how to do that. Walks you right through the whole process. Just remember also, an easy way to see what's coming up each week on Level Up Law is to follow us on our Facebook page, where we post everything. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can see those links right here on the slide, and you'll get this notification and lots of other good information that our IT department and social media folks are always sharing with the public. Well, thanks for tuning in to Level Up Law today, everybody. Thanks again to Bronte and Ellie from our Conway office. And everyone in the audience, we look forward to having you back with us next week when we will be talking about guardianships and conservatorships in probate court. All right, everybody, that concludes today's webinar. Thanks for tuning in.